Welcome back to Men vs. Weed, the Farm to Lung Cannabis Review Podcast. I'm your host, Tango Hotel Charlie. If you like the podcast and want to support the show, please consider rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Today's sample is Tangerine cookies from Wink. Wink is a TREC product. TREC brands themselves as the socially responsible cannabis company. To reflect that name, TREC is an acronym that stands for Trust, Respect, Equality, and Compassion. They have two product lines, and the other brand is called Blist. It is aimed at 30 to 35-year-old women. TREC has committed to what they call 10% for good. How this works is they take 10% of their year-end gross profits and donate them to select charitable partners. They say they listen to their employees about what causes to support, as well as taking feedback from their customer base. These partners include a range of causes such as female empowerment, environmental issues, and cannabis amnesty. Charities such as Dress for Success, they provide interview outfits for women in need. Evergreen, they work to make cities more environmentally sustainable. And Cannabis Amnesty, they fight for pardons and help Canadians who have been harmed by cannabis prohibition, as well as Sick Kids, Toronto Rehab, and the George Hull Centre. The George Hull Centre is a foundation that promotes programs and provides resources that ensure mental health wellness through all stages of life. With all the shitbags in the industry, I gotta say, it's nice to see. TREC is a CPG, or Consumer Packaged Goods Company. A CPG is a company that works exactly as it sounds. They sell packaged goods, like Yum Corporation sells Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC. In this case, the goods being packaged are cannabis, and TREC doesn't grow any of it at all. They buy it from other LPs, throw it in a fancy package, then flip it to you for a premium price. They claim to source the highest quality cannabis that matches their vision. Some of the LPs they've purchased and sold cannabis from include Northern Green, Canopy Growth, Aurora, and Meds Cannabis. TREC was founded in 2019 by Trang Trinh, Charles Kabuth, Bassem Hanna, and Matt Shaloub. Trang Trinh is the CEO and ostensibly the face of the company. She has a background in cannabis mergers and acquisitions at Deloitte, an accounting firm. She recognized early that the legal cannabis market would be swooped on by culture vultures and corporatized, and decided she wanted in. She also realized that it was less about the cannabis and more about the branding. Trang Trinh promotes diversity and inclusion. She's passionate about being a role model to other women in a male-dominated industry. And I have to agree, especially given what I've learned during my time doing this podcast. Bassem Hanna is a founding director and chairman of the board. He made his money in real estate. He's a guy who boasts $1 billion in real estate deals. He's also the CEO of a property management company called Omega. They own and rent out some properties, as well as charge other landlords a monthly fee to manage theirs. They do shit like collecting the rent and calling inspectors and maintenance people. Their properties include one-bedroom condos, one-off units, and rental homes. In 2019, this founding director of the socially conscious TREC evicted tenants from their property in the Little Italy neighborhood of Toronto. One tenant who ran a bakery down the street from the property was given no notice, nor was he offered compensation or alternate housing. Then Omega cut off the heat to the property and left them in the cold. Trust, equality, and compassion. Wink. Property management had increased the average rate of one-bedroom apartments to $2,500 a month, a 30% increase over the previous 3 years. Normally, a landlord must provide 120 days notice and 3 months rent to evict tenants. However, thanks to a loophole that was put in place originally to limit the costs to smaller landlords, buildings owned by holding companies and large property managers are benefiting from it at the expense of their evicted tenants. This tenant took Omega to court and lost thanks to that loophole. You see, in order to qualify for the compensation, the building had to have 5 or more units. This location conveniently only had 4. This practice is so common there that they have a term for it. It's called rent-eviction. When asked how evicting low-income tenants fits in with his corporate values of social good and fighting homelessness, Bassem said, quote, "At a certain point you have to say, compassion has its limits." And he went on to say, "I don't feel bad for making that decision." He then reiterated, "I do not feel bad and I won't be made to feel bad, If the courts agree with me, why is this wrong?" Yikes. They tried to do it again at a 6-unit property at a different location. In this case, they told the tenants that they wouldn't be able to return after the renovation. because they were going to reduce the number of units on the property. In other words, they were renovating in the loophole that they had planned to use to evict the tenants without compensation. Anyway, the tenants were understandably alarmed and contacted their local councillor. The councillor said it wasn't the first time his office had been contacted about these renovictions. As a result, he informed Almega that they would be keeping an eye out for any permits filled in relation to the project. Then suddenly Almega had a change of heart and informed the tenants that they had decided to abandon the reno plans. I wonder what made them change their minds. Was it compassion? Wink. Even the local affordable housing advocate, Anna Bailao, decried the practice of renovictions. I don't know about you, but all this seems like the opposite of socially conscious to me. Next we have Charles Caboth. Charles Caboth is a founding director of TREC and also the founder and CEO of Inc. Entertainment. Inc. is a hospitality and entertainment company that consists of mostly nightclubs as well as restaurants, music festivals, talent agencies, and a hotel. They've been around since the early 80s. He's known as the King of Clubs. In 2008, he faced criticism from the LGBTQ community for allowing homophobic artists to perform at his venue. To add to the insult, it was scheduled during Pride Month. He defended the artist's performances that included hate speech and promoting actual violence towards the LGBTQ community, saying that they would just perform somewhere else, and that could result in a violent ending. I don't know, seems to me if you know they spew hate and attract violence, maybe you shouldn't book them. But I guess social consciousness, like compassion, only goes so far. Wink. In 2014, he refused to stop his all-ages electronic dance music parties. Local police and city council became concerned about trusting Inc. to run safe all-ages shows after 30 people went to the hospital in ambulances at one of these events. A bartender at the show said it was the absolute worst event he had ever attended. He said that kids were dropping like flies after getting high the minute they entered the club. He suggested that the city should not allow all-ages shows and was embarrassed to be a part of it. Mr. Caboth, who was at the show, shifted the blame to the promoters instead, claiming that he had just funded it. He also said that the people he hired didn't have a lot of experience and panicked. Then in 2015, pastry chef Kate Burnham filed a human rights complaint against 3 male managers at one of his restaurants for sexual harassment. She put up with 2 years of what she called rampant and unrelenting daily sexual harassment that included being called names and being groped in a walk-in cooler. Eventually, after her complaints continued to be ignored, she left the job. It was only after the human rights complaint was filed that Charles addressed the situation. Charles said that he was, quote, troubled by the incident, and blamed a lack of communication. The company hoped they could resolve the matter through mediation and possibly sexual harassment training for the employees at his restaurant. Possibly. Oof. Equality, am I right? Wink. Finally, we have Matt Shalhoub. He's the money guy. He's a member of the board at TREC and also co-founder of Greenacre Capital. Greenacre Capital provided funding for TREC in the early days. This guy has a bunch of balls in the air. He's also on the board of Weekend Holdings, another group of financiers, Ample Organics, a seed-to-sale tracking software used by Aurora and Afria, Humble and Fume, another cannabis and distribution service that also happens to be partnered with TREC, and Friendly Stranger, a chain of cannabis storefronts. Remember Vic Neufeld? He's the Olympic shell game athlete that resigned from Afria in shame after he was caught defrauding investors using artificially inflated assets in South America. Go listen to the Afria episode, Tango vs. Soleil Sense, to hear all about his fuckery. Vic was one of the largest investors in Greenacre Capital. Anyway, along with Vic Neufeld, Matt was involved in an aggressive cannabis retail expansion plan. They started with heavy investment in Friendly Stranger back in 2018 using his Greenacre Capital Fund. But more on that in a minute. You see, in 2018, the AGCO decided to run a lottery for a limited amount of cannabis storefronts. Applicants were charged thousands of dollars in non-refundable fees for a chance to become one of the less than 50 cannabis stores allowed to sell legal cannabis in all of Ontario. So immediately you see how this would lead to paywalls and corruption. After a thorough independent investigation, it has become clear that several groups gamed the system by stuffing the ballots, so to speak. 2 of those groups were tied to 2 different stores, High Life and The Friendly Stranger. If you want to check out the breakdown, go on Reddit and look up Ballot Stuff Prevails in 2nd Ontario Cannabis Lottery. It was done by a Reddit user named AGCO_lottery. They showed how groups of people were able to work together to manipulate the results of the cannabis lottery. How it worked was, they teamed up with a large group of people aligned together to flood the system in their favor. They did this with the help of their family and friends and their friends' families. They all applied for the cannabis lottery with the goal of increasing their chances of winning. And since they had access to corporate funding, money was no obstacle. User AGCO_lottery also noticed that there were more than a dozen applications numbered sequentially, as if the lawyer or person who filled out the paperwork was the same across the board, not even trying to cover the obvious intention of working in concert. Then when they did win, they either gave up the winning ticket to the store they were working to help, or they just dropped out altogether after failing deadlines. This way, by default, the remaining spots went to the other people in the alliance that were on the waiting list. So back to Matt Shalhoub. The user AGCO_lottery found that the Friendly Stranger owners had 15 submissions, while Matt Shalhoub and his partner at Green Acre, Albert Soberano, used various family members' names to enter 50 more submissions. Vic Neufeld and his family members, also working towards stuffing ballots for Friendly Stranger, accounted for an additional 15 ballots. All in, there were 80 individuals colluding to increase Friendly Stranger's chances. Talk about organized crime. They found that between High Life and Friendly Stranger, they had stuffed the boxes with 1,600 of the 4,000 submissions, and won somewhere around 30% of the lottery, and owned all the top positions on the waiting list. I highly recommend you go check out that thread on Reddit with all the names and data. It's very interesting, and clearly a lot of work went into it. Eventually that lottery was scrapped in Ontario, and the store caps removed. So it would appear that it was all a pointless cash grab to give a few players a head start by a couple of years. The growers of this Tangerine cookies strain are called Meds, brought to you by Galaxy Brand LP, then repackaged and sold under the Wink brand. Meds are located in Toronto. They claim to be high quality, small batch, long cured, and non-irradiated. According to the site, the flower is grown indoors in living soil with no pesticides. They say the premium whole flower is 100% hand trimmed. They are a farm-to-customer grower. What this means is they get to allot a space in their warehouse that is earmarked for the OCS. Then, in order to sell their own product, they must sell a portion of their cannabis to the OCS. That product goes into that space in their own warehouse that is designated to the OCS. Then, they have to buy it back from the OCS in order to sell it to customers. Only a limited amount of companies even have licenses for this. And it's also controlled by the AGCO. Not only do they have to buy back their own product, but they also have to pay taxes and wait 60 days. While this might be the standard protocol for OCS when they're selling it from their own stores, this obviously makes no sense here. Tangerine Cookies is listed as a potent sativa-dominant strain that is known for its mouth-watering orange citrus flavor and earthy, creamy undertones. Its THC is listed at 20.6%, and its most prominent terpenes are beta-caryophyllene, myrcene, and limonene. That's peppery, hoppy, and citrusy. It was a limited drop that originally sold for $50 an eighth. I paid $30 for 3.5 grams. That works out to about $10.50 a gram, and $295 an ounce plus tax, which is about $330 for an ounce. That is way overpriced. It came in a black Ziploc pouch that was dated June 2nd, 2021, making it 4 months old when I bought it. Inside the pouch is hands down the best looking bag appeal of the 30 or so samples I've tested to this point. The entire eighth was just 2 buds. One large and one was popcorn sized. Usually there are tiny crumbles or popcorn at best. So this was really nice and got me excited thinking I might finally have a winner. The limonene was popping out of the bag, hitting you with that familiar tangerine clementine aroma. Again, curb appeal, 10 out of 10. The buds were quite dense, well-groomed, and thanks to a moisture pack, not bone dry. The bag weighed in at 3.5 grams. Under the microscope, the trichomes were fairly typical for legal weed. Beat up on the outside and intact on the inside. There seemed to be less goopy crustiness, but there were still signs of it. The grower claims they don't irradiate and hand trim, so I don't know, what do you think might be causing that damage? When I look at my own cannabis, I see forests of perfectly round, ripe trichome heads. They're never withered or chunky. Also, both buds were littered with black microfibers and what appeared to be bug bodies. The fibers looked exactly like the ones I've seen on several other samples from multiple LPs. I have to wonder what product they're all using that does this. The bug bodies are just small black or reddish-brown pieces of debris. There were only 2 buds in the bag, and this non-cannabis material was evident on both of them. As well, on one bud, I noticed inside a crevice what appeared to be white webbing. There were white strands in an area connecting from one spot to another in a sort of starburst pattern. It wasn't widespread, and I didn't see it again, but it seems to me that shouldn't be there, at any price point. As is customary, I rolled up a 1-gram joint. I did so after many hours of deliberation and trepidation, so by the time I got around to smoking it for my wake and bake, it was 4 hours after I got up. As is usually the case with moisture packs, it was much drier inside, although it was stickier than most samples I've tried. Breaking it up released more tangy fragrance, and when I rolled it up and took a dry puff, it tasted like clementines and microfibers. It burned fairly clean looking with a light gray ash. However, it was quite harsh on the nose and throat. It caused me to cough quite a bit as well. I tried it again later in a fresh clean water bong to see if the water filtration would help, but I got the same result and the taste didn't come through at all. But most disappointingly of all, the high was just meh. I would rate it mild to medium, very weak, and short lasting. Especially after a late wake and bake where you expect to get extra medicated. So I don't know. While I really like the idea of donating to great causes, I'm not sure the folks live up to the ideals they brand themselves with. But I'll leave that up to you to decide for yourself. When I saw the flower, I was really excited. To the naked eye, it looked fantastic, and it smelled great. But under the bright lights, they really let themselves down. For 300 an ounce, you have to knock it out of the park. And this was more of a ground ball. So I think I'm going to have to sit on the bench for this one. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll try them again in the future. Maybe by then they will tweak those prices and kick quality assurance in the ass. Wink. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Man vs. Weed. I appreciate your continued support. As always, if you want to help out, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you can leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever, that would be fucking dope. If not, that's cool too. If you'd like to find me on Twitter, I go by Street Villain. And if you'd like to email me with any questions or what have you, it's manversusweedthc@gmail.com. Until next time, get higher than EDM kids at an all-ages festival and free the weed.